largest cave passage in the world, and they call it Sơn Đoòng.
Things reveal themselves like big chambers, big passages, or tight, narrow bits, beautiful formation.
Deep in the Phong Nha-Kẻ National Park, in central Vietnam, there is a cave that is simply a geological wonder. This is Sơn Đoòng, the largest known cave passage in the world. It is so enormous that it has its own jungle, clouds, rainfall, and even a climate completely different from the world outside. For years, most explorers believed they had already explored and mapped this giant underground world. But in 2023, a team of geologists went deeper into Sơn Đoòng than anyone had before, carrying drones, LiDAR, and advanced scanning equipment. And what they found defied everything they thought they knew about this cave. A hidden cave beneath the known cave. Strange signals repeating at almost exact intervals. And deep inside, a stone slab covered in markings that seemed thousands of years older than the first known human civilizations. So, what exactly did they discover inside the world's largest cave? And what could still be hidden in its deepest parts? Let's find out. The cave beneath the cave. On December 10th, 1990, a 21-year-old Vietnamese logger named Ho Can was deep inside the forests of what is now Phong Nha-Kẻ National Park, searching for valuable agar wood. But suddenly, the weather turned violent. A tropical storm swept through the jungle, forcing Can to find shelter. As he moved along a limestone cliff, he noticed an opening hidden in the rocks. But something about it immediately felt wrong. A powerful blast of cold air was rushing out of the darkness. Thick mist was spilling from the entrance, and somewhere deep below, Can could hear the roar of a river he could not see. He had no ropes, no lights, and no idea how deep the opening went, so he stayed out. When the storm passed, Can returned home, and eventually, the jungle swallowed the location from his memory. For nearly 18 years, that enormous opening remained lost. Then Can met British cave explorers Howard and Deb Limbert. When he described the strange hole that breathed cold air and sounded like a river was raging beneath the ground, they immediately wanted to find it. Can searched for the entrance again and again, but after so many years, he simply couldn't remember exactly where he had seen it. Then, in 2008, they finally found it again, and the moment they entered it, everything changed. This was Sơn Đoòng, now recognized as the largest known cave passage in the world. It stretches for more than 8.8 kilometers, with some sections reaching over 150 meters wide and more than 200 meters high. Its chambers are so enormous that a 40-story building could fit inside, and the cave is so vast that it even has its own climate, completely different from the world above. The discovery quickly attracted international attention. More expeditions followed, detailed surveys were carried out, and Sơn Đoòng became one of the most famous caves on Earth. After years of exploration, it seemed that scientists had finally mapped the cave, studied its strange environment, and understood what was inside. Or so they thought. Because in 2023, something was found beneath this massive cave, and it changed the entire story. A new geological mapping effort used modern scanning technology to examine the area in far greater detail. The goal was not simply to photograph the cave. Scientists wanted to understand what was beneath the sections that previous expeditions could not fully investigate. And during the survey, the instruments detected something that shouldn't have been there. A massive underground void appeared beneath the known cave system. At first, the scanning software treated the reading as an error, perhaps a reflection, signal interference, or a problem caused by the complicated rock formations. So the team ran the survey again. The same result appeared. They compared different datasets and checked the anomaly with different scanning methods. Each test pointed to the same conclusion. There was a massive empty space beneath the known cave. At that point, it was no longer reasonable to blame the equipment. Something enormous was actually hidden beneath their feet, something whose size and shape looked nothing like a natural formation. The unnatural geometry. But before the team could investigate this strange geometry, they first had to find a way inside. Because this new section detected beneath Sơn Đoòng was not simply another open passage waiting to be explored. A massive rock collapse had sealed the area, blocking the route from the known cave. In geology, an event like this is called a breakdown event. Huge sections of limestone can collapse when water weakens the rock over long periods, eventually filling and blocking an underground passage. But this collapse raised a much bigger question. Had anyone ever been inside before it was sealed? The answer seemed to be no, because the scientists found no obvious signs of human activity around the sealed area. No ancient footprints, no soot marks from torches, no discarded tools, and no disturbed layers of cave sediment. That meant, if the space had really been sealed since the collapse, whatever lay beyond it could have remained completely untouched by humans. But while the place showed no signs of humans, there was already something unsettling about its reputation. People living near the area had long considered this particular site dangerous, even cursed. They told stories of animals refusing to go anywhere near it, while birds would sometimes suddenly change direction when flying over the area. Scientists initially treated these stories as folklore. There were, after all, perfectly natural reasons why animals might avoid a particular area. Deep underground cavities can create changes in air pressure and extremely low-frequency vibrations, called infrasound, which humans may barely notice, but animals can detect. So the strange behavior didn't prove anything, but then the instruments began detecting something unusual. As the team examined the scans more closely, some passages appeared to maintain almost the same width for hundreds of meters. And to understand why that was so strange, you have to know how caves normally form. Water slowly eats through cracks and weak points in limestone, following the easiest path and creating passages that twist, narrow, widen, and break into uneven shapes. But these passages didn't seem to follow that pattern. They were far too uniform. But that wasn't the only unusual thing. Sound was also behaving in a way that made no sense. Instead of scattering off rough, uneven walls, some echoes seemed to return cleaner and more focused, as if the sound were bouncing off unusually smooth surfaces. And then, while the researchers were still trying to make sense of the strange shapes and echoes, their sensors picked up something that made the entire team stop. A faint vibration appeared. Then, it disappeared. 26 minutes later, it returned. The team waited. Again, 26 minutes. The same vibration kept coming back at almost exactly the same interval. Earthquakes, underground rivers, and natural rock movement can all produce vibrations, but they don't normally behave like a clock. Whatever was beneath Sơn Đoòng wasn't simply a sealed space anymore. Something low down there appeared to be repeating, and when the team followed that strange signal deeper into the cave, they entered a world that, at first, seemed to defy nature itself, a forest without a sky. Hundreds of meters below the surface, the team saw something they simply weren't prepared for. A massive jungle was growing inside the cave. Yes, a real jungle, deep beneath the surface, surrounded by enormous walls of limestone. But how was that even possible? The researchers first looked up, and that gave them the first answer. Massive openings in the cave ceiling were allowing sunlight to reach hundreds of meters underground. But sunlight alone couldn't explain what they were seeing. The team noticed that the air inside the deeper parts of Sơn Đoòng could stay around 22 degrees Celsius, much cooler than the hot, humid air outside. When that warm air entered through the openings and met the colder air inside, its moisture began to condense. And then they saw something even harder to explain. Clouds were forming inside the cave, not just a thin layer of mist, actual clouds hanging in the enormous chambers. As the moisture continued to condense, tiny droplets began falling from them like light underground rain. For the researchers, this meant Sơn Đoòng wasn't simply sheltering plants. It had its own microclimate. And then they saw the vegetation. Giant ferns pushed through moss-covered rocks. Vines climbed across the limestone. Some plants had grown sharply toward the limited sunlight, developing thin, wide leaves that helped them capture every bit of light reaching the cave floor. After seeing so many unusual plants, the team began collecting samples, and the first genetic tests left everyone stunned. Nearly 40% of the plant samples failed to match existing genetic records. Some sequences were so different from known plants that they appeared to belong to deeply separated evolutionary lineages. But then one of the plants did something no one expected. The moment a researcher touched a vine, it snapped shut almost like a trap. Scientists call this kind of touch-triggered movement thigmonasty, the same basic response seen in plants such as the Venus flytrap. But this reaction was far faster and more violent than expected, and the forest wasn't the only thing behaving strangely. As drones moved through the cloud-filled chambers, their radar and temperature sensors began failing inside certain layers of fog. The team called these strange moving formations ghost fronts. At first, they seemed like unusual pockets of warm and cold air, but some of them were moving against the surrounding air currents, making them impossible to explain through normal atmospheric behavior. The jungle alone was already hard to explain in a place like this, but what the researchers noticed next was life, and it was nothing like they had ever seen before. Life in the darkness. The first creature they noticed was a cave spider, unlike anything they had seen in the region. Its body was covered by a hard, metallic-looking shell, almost like armor. In a normal spider, the outer body is made mainly of flexible chitin. Here, the shell appeared heavily mineralized, giving it a dark, metal-like surface. Then came the lizards, and they had no visible eyes. They moved through the wet soil with almost no sound, using their bodies and other senses to navigate instead of sight. This kind of adaptation is known in deep cave animals as troglodytic evolution. In permanent darkness, eyes become almost useless, so some species gradually lose them and develop stronger ways to detect movement, chemicals, and tiny vibrations around them. But these animals seem to have taken that adaptation much further. A little farther ahead, the team discovered tiny crustaceans with hexagonal shells that scattered the light from their equipment like tiny crystals. Then one of them moved. A faint glow appeared across its body. Another creature nearby began glowing too. Then another. Within seconds, a wave of light had traveled through the group. The researchers realized the creatures weren't simply glowing in the darkness. Their bioluminescence appeared to be triggered by movement. A person's footsteps or movement through the air could create a physical disturbance, and the creatures responded with flashes of light, almost like a visible signal spreading through the water and air. And when the team put all of these discoveries together, the world in front of them began to seem almost impossible. But the biggest problem was energy. If this ecosystem had been isolated from the surface for thousands of years, where was all its energy coming from? The plants had sunlight, but some of these animals lived far beyond its reach. So, whatever supported them seemed to come from somewhere much deeper, somewhere beneath the lake, inside a chamber that, from every angle, looked artificial. The artificial chamber. The chamber was about 150 meters deeper into the cave, beyond the strange underground ecosystem, and it looked completely different from anything they had seen before. The limestone was gone. Instead, the walls were covered in a dark, metallic-looking material that appeared almost perfectly uniform. At first, the geologists thought they were looking at basalt, a volcanic rock that can become extremely dark when it cools. But the tests didn't agree. Samples from the wall showed an astonishing 97% chemical uniformity. The material looked less like ordinary rock and more like something that had been refined or manufactured. But the walls made the problem even stranger. They weren't rough like limestone, and they didn't have the cracks, bubbles, or melted textures normally associated with volcanic rock. Instead, they curved inward in long, smooth arcs. almost as if the entire chamber had been shaped inside a mold. Then, the researchers noticed something on the ground. Several small stones, each about the size of a coin, were floating a few centimeters above the surface. They checked them for iron and magnetic properties, but there wasn't enough magnetic material to explain what they were seeing. Whatever was holding those stones up wasn't behaving like an ordinary magnet, and the cave itself seemed to be affecting mineral growth in ways that made even less sense. Some stalactites, the mineral formations that hang from cave ceilings, weren't pointing downward as expected. They were growing sideways from the walls, while others twisted into corkscrew-like shapes. Thin crystal sheets stretched horizontally across the chamber, almost as if something had forced the minerals to grow in a particular direction. Then, an engineer struck one with a metal rod. Instead of producing the dull sound expected from rock, the crystal gave off a clear ringing tone that seemed to travel deep beneath their feet. And once again, the sensors detected a pattern. A low-frequency pulse was repeating every 42 minutes. This was different from the 26-minute vibration detected earlier. The chamber appeared to have its own repeating cycle. By this point, almost everything about the chamber felt unnatural, from its walls to the mysterious sound. And then, one of the researchers noticed something buried in the soil nearby. A round stone slab covered with strange markings. The 12,000 years old markings. The slab was about a meter wide, and its surface was covered with strange geometric markings. At first, the researchers thought they might be dealing with some kind of ancient decoration, but when they cleaned the surface and examined the marks more closely, they noticed something far more organized. The lines had similar widths, repeated in groups, and followed a consistent arrangement. Some formed triangles and diamond-like shapes, while others looked like sharp, intersecting strokes. This wasn't random artwork. It looked like a writing system. And then came the comparison that made the discovery even harder to explain. Some of the geometric patterns showed similarities to Proto-Elamite, an undeciphered script used in ancient Iran around 3100 to 2900 BCE. That didn't mean the slab was Proto-Elamite or that anyone had decoded it. It simply meant the markings shared certain structural features with one of the world's oldest known writing systems. But there was one big problem. The markings appeared to be around 12,000 years old. That would place them near 10,000 BCE, thousands of years before the earliest known Mesopotamian writing, which appeared around 3400 BCE. If that date was correct, the slab wasn't just an ancient inscription. It could have been evidence of organized writing thousands of years earlier than historians thought possible. And that raised an even bigger question. If the chamber had truly been sealed before humans could ever reach it, who had carved these markings in the first place? The researchers moved the slab slightly to examine what was underneath it. Their ground-penetrating radar immediately picked up something unusual beneath the floor. There was another empty space, then another and another. The scans began revealing a vast hexagonal network of connected chambers extending deep through the rock, arranged almost like a giant underground honeycomb. And this time, the geometry wasn't simply unusual, it was repeated across the entire structure. Then, from somewhere deep inside that hidden network, the sensors detected a new signal. It wasn't the 26-minute pulse from above. It wasn't the 42-minute vibration from the chamber. This one was repeating every 4 minutes and 37 seconds. And unlike the other signals, this one seemed to be coming from somewhere even deeper, as if something far below was calling them further into the cave. Inside the deepest part. The signal led the researchers toward the deepest part of the hidden network, far beyond the chamber where they had discovered the ancient slab. Here, the geometry became even more striking. The scans showed that the hexagonal chambers were not isolated pockets. They were connected by narrow passages, forming a much larger underground system that extended deeper into the bedrock. Then the researchers noticed something else. The 4-minute, 37-second signal was strongest at the lowest point they could reach. Every time it returned, The instruments detected the same low-frequency pulse coming from beneath the floor rather than from the surrounding walls. It wasn't simply another strange sound. The signal seemed to have a source, and when the researchers mapped its direction, it appeared to lead toward a section of the network they still couldn't enter. Because by then, something else had started happening to the team. Some researchers began reporting strange gaps in their memory. A few couldn't remember parts of the journey they had just taken. Others said they were hearing voices that seemed to have no source. At first, they blamed exhaustion and the extreme conditions underground. But the deeper they tried to go, the worse the situation became. It was almost as if the cave itself was a paradox. On one side, the signal seemed to be calling further in, while on the other, something about the cave was affecting them, as if warning them to never reach its deepest part. So here we are. Sơn Đoòng Cave is already famous as the largest known cave passage on Earth. Yet it may hold something far greater than researchers have discovered so far. So, if no human had ever entered this hidden world, who created this underground complex? And why was it sealed away? And if something is still sending those signals from the deepest part, what exactly is it trying to tell us? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.